For our listeners and viewers of COBT, it's Maynard, Mike, and Arjun here with a special edition that we're super excited about. Venezuela has obviously been one of these stories of the year so far, and it's one of the big variables in today's world. We found an old friend and a real expert, Ali Moshiri. Ali's a 40-year former executive with Chevron. He's still an advisor to the company. But Ali spent much of his career in Latin America and in particular in Venezuela. He's now with Amos Energy, his own firm, and they're thinking about doing things in Venezuela. He's a fantastic energy executive, has a lot of thoughts about a lot of places. Ali, we're delighted to have you and cannot wait to get your perspectives on Venezuela and anything else we can get you to talk about.
Thank you very much. Thank you for being with you guys. And it's really the right timing to talk about Venezuela. There's a lot of things going on, and looking forward to our conversation in here.
Well, we're super excited to get, there's so much talk about Venezuela at a high level. We're going to get to go granular today. Mike, anything you would add before we jump in with Ali?
Yeah, maybe two quick things I'd say is, not to basically talk too much about oil and gas, but I just think commodities has been a big theme this year. If you look at oil and gas, because of what's happened in Venezuela, Iranian issues, stuff of that nature, you've had, oil prices go up and down quite dramatically. On the gas side, natural gas side, obviously winter weather has hit, gas has gone doubled, and basically been cut in half, and so we're all over the place, and it really depends on what, happens at the end of the withdrawal season. But I think the other thing that has been really wild this year is to watch gold, silver, copper, Bitcoin. They are all over the place. Most of those are hitting all-time highs. They've pulled back, so there's a lot of volatility, and it just tells you that the commodity markets is something you should be focused on. The markets are focused on it. The second thing I'd say in regards to our guests in Venezuela, we've been listening to most of the Q4 calls with the oil majors and the limited amount of oil services companies that have reported so far, that being Baker, Halliburton, and Schlumberger. A lot of questions around Venezuela and not a lot of answers around Venezuela. So we're really looking forward to hearing what our guest has to say about Venezuela.
Awesome. Arjun, anything on your mind before we jump in?
Maynard, I think I'm really excited about our guest and this topic today. Amongst our big themes has been the idea that first, oil demand continues to grow globally last year, this year, and in the years ahead. And that while we remain sort of optimistic that there's a long-term plateau for shale, the fact that it's been 90% of net global oil supply growth over the last decade, we're not expecting that to repeat. So it's always been a question of sort of when do individual companies or executives start thinking about what comes after U.S. shale? It's going to be there. It's going to be a big long-term plateau, but we're going to need new areas. And, Venezuela is a country that at the start of my career in the early 1990s, they were opening up. Luis Justi, as I recall, might have been the head of PDVSA or the energy minister, and it was a tremendous success. It was integrated projects between a lot of the largest companies. Mr. Moshiri, of course, was at Chevron. Them and several others were in the country. And we saw a lot of success in those initial developments where they developed the upstream. They often were integrated with refineries in the Gulf Coast. And of course, the country went in a different direction over the last 20 years. And one knew that something had to give. I don't think we would have predicted it would have been a January 2nd incursion by the U.S. to take out Mr. Maduro. But here we are today. And so it's always been a highly prospective country. I think it is unfortunate where the country ended up over the last 20 years. And I think we can only hope that they are going to start heading in a better direction. And the oil industry is going to be a huge part of that. We need some of the existing large companies, but we also need newer companies here. So I think with that, Maynard, I'm really excited to hear the thoughts of our guest today.
Okay, awesome. Well, Ali, let's jump in. I was maybe one place to start, if you don't mind. We can go anywhere you would like to go, but there's been so much discussion, big picture, about Venezuela and what the production is, what the issues are, how much it'll cost. There's all of this, but I think you'll have knowledge of people on the street, the real economy, if safety is improving, the condition of assets. Like what would you tell us that's just more at the micro level that would better inform us about what's going on in the country right now?
Let me kind of give you a little bit of landscape. I travel to Venezuela quite often. Actually, probably since I retired from Chevron, I've been going there 3-4 times a year for various reasons. There has been a tremendous misunderstanding about Venezuela because probably last 40 years we've been very much occupied by talking about illegal migrants, about gang members, Venezuela problem, deportation, and so forth. For everybody lost what is really Venezuela is all about. After my retirement from Chevron, I started the Amos Global Energy, and one of our focus was Venezuela, and fundamentally was based on the two factors in here. Number one, the resource base they have and availability of the resource base. These are not very complicated operation. Most of the resources or all of the oil resources are onshore. And with the understanding of Faja, which actually starts somewhere around mid-1990s, Venezuela suddenly came up as one of the largest resource-based country. Well, that was one. The other one, Venezuela was the distance between Venezuela and U.S. is really create a good marketing strategy. And especially in 1990s, when the light and heavy differential was very large, a lot of conversion happened in the Gulf of the refineries for the heavy oil because it was cheaper and it was make a lot of sense. That's the reason actually those upgraders start playing role in the development of Venezuela. Well, Venezuela went through the transformation of being a light oil company with a lot of heavy oil, no place to go. Actually, we negotiated Boscan Field in 1995, and then there was an opening that happened in late 1990s. Everybody got in, and then heavy oil becoming really a centerpiece for Venezuela. Let's clarify a couple of things, and what I'm giving you is not based on information that we just at the high level. These are detailed work that we have done. And we've been working on Venezuela for 7 years. We got a PPM prepared, private placement memorandum for an investor and so forth. But you got to classify the 300 billion barrels that everybody talk about, what it's all about. If you look at light oil, Venezuela doesn't have a significant light oil. You got enough light oil to be able to blend with the heavy oil. The heavy oil is dominated part. It's somewhere around 220 billion barrels. But the primary recovery is actually only 8%. And that's based on the experience. It's not just an economist talking about, I'm talking a person that's been involved and understand the field. And we can get about 8%. You need to go into the secondary recovery. And that secondary recovery, it was tested and proved to be doable. Is a steam flood. Half and puff has been done. Small steam flood pilot has been done. You can get the recovery factor into the 20 and 25%. With that, you arrive on the 300 billion barrels resource. Now, just think about it. The steam flood is not a cheap process. Actually, they said you got to burn money to make money. That's how it works. You got to generate the steam and that costs money. Well, when you look at it, the resource base, you really got to walk in understanding what you are getting into. And the resources in Venezuela actually spread all the way from east to west. And Lake Maracaibo got a tremendous amount of resources, but from environmental point of view, it's not going to be a target for any investors at this point. I believe everything going to move into the eastern side. Talking about the production side, Venezuela can reach to about 1.5 million barrels, with probably 1.5 million barrels per day, with $5 to $7 billion. The current infrastructure can actually take additional 500,000 to 600,000 barrels a day more. Remember, Venezuela start the production before they start giving the service contract and license to Chevron and so forth. It was producing somewhere around 650 to 700. the company managed to bring it close to 1 million. Therefore, we got another 500,000 barrels to go. Now, if you want to go above 1.5 million barrels, then you get into the modifying the infrastructure, and you got to add a lot of infrastructure and facility above the ground, because some of these facilities has not been up to date to be able to handle up to 2.5 million barrels a day. For example, Venezuela got about 38 billion barrels of storage capacity. Today, they can handle only 40% of that. We're getting to 2.5. We are estimating somewhere around 60 to 80 billion dollars need to come in. Just these are the tranches. Now, when you get to 2.5, you have heard a lot of folks talking about, oh, Venezuela can produce 4 million barrels. Yes, we predicted it can produce 4 million barrels. But you do realize Venezuela never, ever, on a sustainable base, ever produced over 2.5 million. Because at that time, then you're talking about oil prices coming in play. And oil prices kind of cap Venezuela production somewhere between 2.5 and 3 million barrels. As pointed out by your colleague very rightly, if situation in Iran turn out to be in the positive direction, Ukraine, Russia have a more flow of oil coming into the market, Venezuela coming in, just think about how much stress it's going to put on the oil prices. It's the same thing for Venezuela. Venezuela production is very sensitive, above 2.5 million barrels, and it's sensitive to the oil prices. That's a general landscape. Now, for Venezuela economy to jumpstart, we have conveyed this one to our government as well. It really starts with the oil production. If we increase the production of Venezuela to 1.5 million barrels, the GDP of the company, the GDP of the country is going to be around $250 billion. Therefore, it's a tremendous economic recovery for Venezuela. That's the reason our focus is to get the investment back into the country and get it jump-started. And the only silver bullet for Venezuela is increasing oil production.
What about people? And I don't, of course, citizens and their lives, but also workforce and getting people to increase production. Like what are just some of the limits outside of capital that you see getting things going?
Well, a lot of people are saying that a lot of Venezuelans, they're going to move back and bring the old PDVSA skill back into the country. The chance of that is limited, and you cannot bet on it. Most of them, they're in the different life cycle right now. They got family. Going back is going to be a little bit slower and difficult. You got to rely on the people that they are on the ground, and you got to bring the workforce expat to train them and get them up to speed and relying more on the local content and local human resources. Is it possible? Yes, I work for the large company, and I know how we went through the transformation, that at one time we had 80% expat to some of the operation that is only 95%, only 5% expat, 95% are national. Therefore, they got to go through the training. But have that in mind. As I pointed out, the service sector in Venezuela are very sophisticated. You need Halliburton, Baker, Schlumberger, no doubt about it. But the service sector can jumpstart very quickly. And I deal with them. They can really get in there and get things moving. That's the reason I said 1.5 million barrels target within the next 12 to 18 months is a realistic one. If you aim higher than that, you create a chaos. It's not about bringing capital. It's a matter of, do I have a human resources? Do I have a services? Even you do, you got to put an execution plan together to make sure that's happened. That's what we've been working for the last 5 years. How are we going to execute when the fund is ready to be implemented? And that you can rely a lot on the local services, expat, and combination of all this and get the production going. Regarding the security, this it's something that you got to manage. I always tell people our business is managing risk. In the meantime, we produce oil and gas. First thing we do everywhere we go is how to manage the risk, security of our facilities, security of our people, and so forth. Therefore, is it doable? Absolutely. Is it bad today? I don't think it's as bad as people are expressing and as bad as the expectation is, because like I said, I speak from my experience. I travel there, I go to the field. Yeah, you got to have certain things to make sure nothing goes wrong, but I don't think it's going to be I think it's something that you can mitigate it very easily.
One thing about all this is, every time Venezuela is discussed, and perhaps it's really been the history of the country in oil and gas, it has been a big company game, right? So you think of the history, who's there now? It's been big companies, integrated companies, big project, lots of capital. You're obviously a smaller entity. What do you think is what role can smaller companies play in the redevelopment of Venezuela, and what do you notice about people's interest in investing in Venezuela? Because we've heard what some of the bigger companies are saying, but you're kind of operating at a different level.
Absolutely. From my point of view, the big company that they are not there, they're going to be the last to go in. You look at it, they got in there because it was by invitation of PDVSA during the 1990 establish a process like the opening of Venezuela to the private sector in late 1990 was very structured bidding process and so forth. And the big company that they left, I really doubted they would be the one going to come forward. The big company that they are there, they are the one going to accelerate the investment. Eni, Repsol, Chevron, they know it. They got large staff in place. They kept the organization going, which actually turned out to be the best decision they made. They are the one going to basically be there and accelerate it. I really doubted other major oil company going to jump in. Number one is the way the process works. I really doubted they could have gone to the White House and any of them that they are not in the country openly can say, oh, we're going to invest, we're going to contribute billions of dollars to Venezuela, because they already submitted the plan. They already sent the guideline to the market. And the market going to ask them question, where'd that come in? What do you substitute in? What are you taking away from one place, putting in here? What is the structure? The whole plan going to fall apart. They are much more process-driven, much more organized. I think the companies that you're going to see is going to be mid-sized company, a smaller company, and private capital. They got a different risk profile. And we have been approached tremendously by all three sectors, all three of them. The unfortunate thing is mid-sized company and a smaller company don't have that knowledge base that the big company have. When that you take, for example, Conoco. Conoco knows a lot about Venezuela. They can evaluate, they can get there, and they can start the operation. But the bottleneck for them is how can I manage internally, especially in the concern that was pointed out by your colleague about the volatility of the oil price. How am I going to shift the money, capital from one place to Venezuela? But they know it. There's mid-size and a smaller company is very, the knowledge base is limited. And that's what we are trying to do. I spend a lot of time trying to explain the situation in Venezuela, the opportunity and the challenges that might be there. Private capital, the risk tolerance is higher and they are willing to go, but they don't have a knowledge necessary of oil and gas. Well, we are working with these three sectors. But be honest with you, 2 months ago, I couldn't get the attention of anybody listen to Venezuela opportunity. Today, I'm on the phone about 90% of my time trying to explain that. But I say this a little bit, it's like a gold rush. It's somebody kind of announces a gold rush, everybody running there to say that, asking for information. They want to have an understanding and so forth. Therefore, there is a lot of interest, but the commitment is not there yet. And then we are the one trying to work very hard, trying to say, it's okay, we can manage the risk. We already operated there. We know how things going to work, and it's a good time to move in. To answer your question, I think you're going to see the smaller company, mid-sized company is going to be the first to go in.
Wow, that's pretty interesting, Ali. I maybe want to get a sense of, it's been about a month since we extracted Maduro from Venezuela, and we've seen a lot of headlines, a lot of stuff coming out of the White House. I want to kind of get your read. I know it may be a bit early, just in the last month. What is really going on, just politically? What's going on in the ground? How are the basically Venezuelans reacting? Just is there optimism? Where are we here? Are we rounding first base? Or are we still in the batter's box, sort of?
Well, I'll give you my opinion, and I have expressed that opinion openly before. I think our administration, President Trump, Secretary Rubio, his strategy has been perfect. What they have done is absolutely so far is fantastic. Number one, the way that they decided how the priority should stay in Venezuela. As Secretary Rubio correctly said number one is be able to have stability, short-term stability, go into the transition, and then go to the true democratic election. Their view was you got to deal with the current system to make sure there's no chaos in the country. He articulated so well regarding that, and pretty much supporting Delcy Rodriguez was a correct call. When the market recognized it, just think about it. As I pointed out, there are a lot of interests, but the commitment is kind of lagging behind. If there was a little bit of chaos on the street of Venezuela, the interest would be zero. We would be back to prior to January 2nd. What our administration has done is fantastic. And just recent, I announced the top diplomat for Venezuela. She's in Caracas, Ambassador Laura Dugo. She's a very qualified individual, was an ambassador for Central America, fluent in Spanish. She knows quite a bit. I think the collaboration between Delcy Rodriguez and the U.S. government and make sure that short-term stability and mid-term stability is the key. I think that brings a lot of confidence to the investors. And we hear that one every day. I think what we're going to see in here that more investment is going to move into Venezuela. As I pointed out, it's going to be that investment coming first from the first tranche is going to be existing major company being there. The second tranche is going to be company like us that we heavily relying on the capital market. And one of the things that we are very hopeful that the U.S. government will send a signal that the investors would be protected, not necessarily from security, but protection from investment. The recent changes to the hydrocarbon law, this is a second draft, is fantastic. It's exactly the changes that we asked for. The government of Venezuela is, via support of the U.S. government, drafted amendment to the hydrocarbon law that you don't need to write a new one. These are very much welcomed by the investors, especially the second draft. But there is a lot of things going on. You can see there is a good collaboration between the Venezuelan government and U.S. government because honestly, it would be impossible to even picture Venezuela can put a draft agreement within 2 weeks or hydrocarbon modification within 2 weeks. But all this sign that coming from the White House, all the messaging coming from the Secretary Rubio and President Trump, all is positive. And I'm very hopeful. And the other thing that you got to think about it, we got to make sure U.S. policy in Venezuela is going to be successful. We can't afford that policy not being successful. What I encourage everybody, trying to be a believer rather than a pessimist. I'm one of those that I said I need more believers on my side to make sure this is going to happen. We can't afford to have in a country like Venezuela so close with tremendous potential being the shape that they were economically before, because it was a really terrible economic situation for Venezuela. Whether or not it was via sanction or corruption and other stuff in Venezuela, that's a different discussion. But overall, for 23 million people, about 20 million of them, they were really living in the very poor condition.
I'd like to build upon Mike's question, and I really appreciated how you differentiated the different types of companies that might pursue opportunities in Venezuela. I think it's certainly, and I agree with you, very easy to see the ones that are there currently, the Chevrons, Eni's, and Repsols. They're under an existing framework. They've got people on the ground. They've been there. I think that's easy to see. And then this idea that it's going to be some of the smaller companies, maybe private equity and so forth, that are going to come in, that actually also makes a lot of sense to me. And then some of the larger ones are in a different situation. Venezuela, as you noted, did have an attractive hydrocarbon law. PDVSA invited people in the 1990s. And then those laws changed in an unfavorable direction. I think this happened now twice in Venezuela, in the 1970s first, and then when President Chavez came into power in the late 90s. The US government's playing a very significant role here that as recently as 2 years ago, no one would have thought was on anyone's bingo card that we're going to go into Venezuela and try and change things there. President Trump's in his second term. There's another, I think, 2.5, 3 years left in it. If one, as a smaller company or a private company coming into Venezuela, how do you gain confidence in the changes to the hydrocarbon law that you expressed as being a good improvement? How do you get confidence in whatever comes after President Trump? Maybe it's a Republican who supports the policies. Maybe it's a Democrat who, 3 years ago would have said, we need to get out of the oil business as a country, never mind a foreign country. What are the kind of things you need to see to, I guess, want to go in there? The size of the prize we agree with, the attractiveness I have always felt, but there's obviously just so many of these above ground challenges, including with the United States government and the duration of sustaining a commitment to Venezuela. How do you sort of think through all of that?
Well, first of all, you got to recognize what has been done in Venezuela. It doesn't matter you're Republican, you're Democrat, we are all together. The United States has all the problems of the Venezuela, all the challenges of Venezuela, and all the opportunities. And you got to handle that. Doesn't matter who's going to be sitting in the White House. I think it would be tremendously disadvantage to our foreign policy that if there is a change in any of the branches, whether or not in the executive branch or legislative branch or the any branches, we change their strategy. And by the way, Venezuelans see the same thing, that the problems, challenges, and opportunities got to be solved collaboratively with their government and U.S. government. That's the fact. Therefore, we cannot divide Venezuela into if the administration changes. And I think the way that Secretary Rubio articulated, trying to make sure that doesn't happen. But you never know about politics. It could happen. My personal view is that what has been structured, and it is in the hydrocarbon law, and the way that they put certain article in the hydrocarbon law, you can protect your investment. You can be able to go in and you can find the opportunity that you can work in the framework. Let me give you a good example of that. You pointed out that the hydrocarbon law that was put together in 2006, the changes, conversion came in 2006, wasn't good. It was good. One company really benefited from it, 2 others left. Just think about it. We are in the business of profitability, return to our shareholders. The company is state, they benefit very well from it. The others left. They left because of the same circumstances. Therefore, in the oil and gas business, you really got to look at the valuation. You got to look at what opportunity do you have. I remember many years ago, we entered into the country that was landlocked country, no access to the pipeline, the small access to Soviet Union. I don't want to disclose that. And everybody looked at us and saying, why you are in this country that you don't have any infrastructure to get the oil out? Right now, it's the largest portfolio and the two largest company in the United States. Therefore, our job is to manage the risk, go in there with the good knowledge and understanding. I personally believe in aggregate with even the law, revised law in here, it minimizes the risk. Does it eliminate the risk? Never does. There is no perfect hydrocarbon law. It never does it. The biggest risk we got in our business is exactly what your colleague said, is the oil price. Venezuela, if oil price get to the certain level, the value of the Venezuela oil, even if it's 300 billion barrels, it may not be there. Then you got to think about it. Do I want to shift money from Permian and put it in Venezuela? A certain oil price is the right decision. A certain oil price is not necessarily a good decision. Those got to be made. And that's what I think the large company going to Venezuela is going to be slow, because as you can see, the focus is on the capital discipline. And what they are looking at it, they're looking at the portfolio and saying, with the volatility in oil, how can I shift my capital from one place to another one on an ad hoc basis? And it's not going to happen. Therefore, I personally believe that the hydrocarbon law is absolutely doable. Does it eliminate all the risk related to exploration and production? No. But if you look at it even before 2006, majority of the agreement with the foreign company was under operating service agreement. There were actually 3 tiers. One of them was for exploration, was equity, then there was a service agreement and so forth. And during the conversion in 2006, they converted all from service to equity. And then the law passed that the government got to have at least 51%. The reason the company left is because they diluted the equity, but they were willing to pay it. And there was a comment made by one of the CEO that they were expropriated. Let's clarify that. Nobody was expropriated. What it was offered different contract term, and some took it, some didn't take it. 3 companies took it, 2 companies didn't take it. Therefore, it wasn't a true expropriation. The only expropriation was during the nationalization.
Maybe just one follow-up, and if I misheard you, please correct me right now. Can you elaborate on the types of protections a company like yourself, your new company, would need from the U.S. government? If I heard that correctly, some sort of protections on the investment. Could you expand on that point, please?
Absolutely. For us, being raising fund for this process, we are hoping our fund, our investment, because when I said fund, people think about something different. We're hoping that it would be 50-50, 50% from private and 50% from public. That's the guarantee today. That is the way that I think everybody expecting that to be a private-public partnership. We raised about $1 billion on the first term of President Trump with one of the emerging market fund in New York. That $600 million was coming from DFC and $400 million from investors. And unfortunately, we couldn't exercise that fund because COVID hit, then Biden administration came in. And you know about that administration, they weren't too friendly with the oil and gas industry. But now we start a new fund, and we are hoping, first of all, this would be a drawdown fund, and it would be half and half, half from the U.S. government, half from the private sector. And again, the structure of that is going to be, whether or not it's going to be through some sort of the partnership or equity. We haven't decided that because we got to find that lead investor for our side. But to answer your question, this is the only hook that we think financially we can put in our term sheet to the investors.
Ali, I'm curious, the other participants in Venezuela, in particular, the Chinese, the Russians, um, these folks, so to speak, what's going on with them? Like, how would you characterize those entities? How are they behaving? How are they going to change? How are they going to adapt? What happens to that group in Venezuela?
Yeah, they've been pretty much monitoring that. Actually, in some extent, you got to understand what position they have in Venezuela and globally. The Chinese position globally is mainly from the commercial point of view. They loan a lot of money to Venezuela. They were lifting about 400 to 450,000 barrels a day of Venezuela crude to pay the loan. They have a couple of operations, but they really weren't there in the form of comparing to big major oil company creating an oil industry or help the industry. They were there to basically create a commerce between China and Venezuela, bringing all this stuff, including drilling rigs, to Venezuela and so forth. But it was a commercial arrangement. And they still got some operation going on. But I don't necessarily think they're going to expand. I don't think they're going to run and trying to influence that they have that more access to the assets. Right. For Russia, it was mainly just being in our hemisphere. I think it was a tick type of attack. We are in our neighborhood. We got to be in Venezuela, and government had a military agreement with them. But from the commercial point of view, they are in a couple of fields, but that's not the core area for them. The core area for them is really Russia. Well, I don't think necessarily they're going to be any bottleneck to what we're trying to do. I don't think neither one of them is gonna expand beyond where they are. I don't think necessarily they're going to compete. I don't think we're going to see a smaller Chinese company coming in and trying to take some of these assets. This is very, very much, like I pointed out, this is an opportunity for us, for American company, for American entrepreneur to go into Venezuela. But from, even in the past, there was some remark was made, which is okay, saying, oh, if you are not there, Chinese and Russian going to be there. I don't think necessarily they had the appetite to pump money into Venezuela oil industry, no matter what the circumstance would have been.
Do you mind talking about, I think for the people who are interested in Venezuela, but didn't have a ton of knowledge about it. So maybe that would be us at some level, which is the political side of it. It's kind of a surprise, I think, to most people that Maduro's number 2 took over, and now we're dealing with her. And I think most people expected Machado would be back. I'm giving you just a casual observer type observation. Do you mind talking about how that has functioned and why that was seemingly through a month of it maybe the right choice?
I mean, that's what I said. President Trump and Secretary Rubio and others absolutely took a right direction. Remember, if you go back, you got an option of taking what we took, a strategy in Afghanistan and Iraq, basically going to the zero base, building the nation and all that. And it's very obvious that didn't work out. We are out of both countries. I don't think necessarily they are better off than they were before. Maybe there are some people can argue about that, but that's okay. I think as Secretary Rubio pointed out, the number one was stability. And stability, the only way would have come through maintaining some of the current system in place. Delcy Rodriguez is a very, very strong individual, very well connected, understand the system, knows where the issues are, what are the things need to work out. Very close to the oil industry. She was fundamental to bring some of these companies back, including largest one, maintaining them in Venezuela. And again, in every political party, you got the extremists, and you got some that they are more moderate and they can collaborate. And I think the current system, Delcy Rodriguez, I think she is falling to the collaboration. And we saw within the month how she's been able to collaborate. Like I said, for me, it's also important because, like I said, I got family there, where stability and security is the key. And even they said 90% of the population supported Mauro Corina. Then 10% is a large population that can create chaos in the country. And those need to be controlled by the Guardia Nacional, by police and military to make sure they got a safe social environment. Basically, society doesn't fall into the chaos. It's the right step. And the other thing that I think it articulated well, the 2024 election was not necessarily election. It was more like a referendum. Of the referendum, do you like Maduro or you don't like Maduro's system? And everybody, majority or 90% or more or less, voted that they don't. A democratic election that Secretary Rubio saying in the third phase is to allow political party to participate. And if that happened today, it's going to be more than just Mauro Corina Machado and Edmundo Gonzalez on the ballot. It's going to be other people that they are very qualified. They got great politicians like Lopez, Capriles, and some young one that they got to compete. And I think the strategy that our government put together is really makes sense. It's absolutely a step by step, measuring every step and moving forward. And I think during this early stage is where the investment got to come in and make sure the oil sector can move forward, bring the production, move the GDP, and then we can go into the democratic election.
Maybe just a big picture about the region. Your background, at one point you were president, Chevron, Africa and Latin America. So you have a very wide perspective on developing countries and all of those economies. Colombia has an election, I think, in March. Mexico is wrestling with some instability in their relationship with the U.S. Argentina has had a big turn. Obviously, there's a lot of good things going on there. Brazil is a notable, super attractive basin for oil and gas. Where I'm headed with this, Ali, is how do you think about Latin America broadly as a place for, let's say, Western energy companies, mining companies, resource companies, whatever the type? Do you think we're going to see a renaissance of activity across the continent, or am I getting carried away stringing together a few of these things? Has there been a change that's larger than Venezuela?
I tell everybody in Latin America, if you don't like the political system, wait 4 or 6 years, it goes the other direction. That's a cycle. You look at Colombia. Colombia is a good example of that. Right now, Petro is there. I'm sure in the next election probably would be something different. You look at Argentina. Argentina now is in the different cycle. And this is what you got to be able to deal with in Latin America. How you can manage your business as political cycle goes from left to right, the changes is happening. And the reason for that is because, the equality in Latin America is still not there. There is a large population of the people that they are at poverty level or below poverty level. They are the one that swing and they go from one to another one. And you saw what's happened even in Brazil. Right now, President Lula, I put 50-50 chance we might go on the other side. And this is what's happening. And my approach always been, being in the oil and gas business over 40 years, is you got to manage the cycle of politics. You can't influence it. You don't know what the outcome is, but you got to be able to manage it and work through it. The question is going to be what the reaction of the market is. Unfortunately, on the equity market, the reaction is very negative. On the private side, it's not that bad. For example, you take in when Petro came in power, you look at Ecopetrol share prices. It really hammered a little bit because of that. But on the private side, if you look at it, there's a still transaction going on in Colombia. Just recently, I think GeoPark just purchased Frontera, and Carlyle picked up Oxy's asset. Things going to happen. But you look at Argentina. Argentina, regardless what the political cycle is still transaction going on in here. But again, I said on the public equity, the answer is a little bit different. The reaction is usually reflect directly to the political system. I don't expect anything changes, at least in my mind. I don't change my strategy because of any of this. And when I worked for one of the best companies, Chevron, was the same thing. We got to deal with it. Let's manage it as we move forward.
Yeah, Ali, when you started talking about raising a fund, that really kind of piqued my interest. And I guess where I want to go with this is that I think most people agree the opportunity set is huge. The question is over what time frame, what are the risks, stuff of that nature. But maybe you said your phone is ringing off the hook. What is the nature of what people are looking at? I mean, I'm thinking about there's upstream, advantages, midstream, downstream, and oil services. Where do you think, at least near term, the best opportunity lies, and maybe sort of over the intermediate to longer term, where are the better opportunities?
The first area is on production. Venezuela needs to increase the production, no doubt about it. And the new amendment to the hydrocarbon law is very, very good to get that going. That's number one. Number two is really on the crude trading. Venezuela got a tremendous amount of inventory right now, as you can see it, and you saw a lot of inventories coming out of the country. Actually, they show that the export from Venezuela increased to about 900,000 barrels a day a week ago. That's basically coming out of the inventory. Where Venezuela crude is supposed to go is also opportunity. That mainly fall for the crude traders and so forth. But to answer your question, right now, the opportunity on increasing the production. That's where the investment got to go. On the midstream, the opportunity is very small because all the infrastructure is belong to PDVSA. There is no way you can. And by the way, it's not a very good business to get in right now because I'm not sure the reliability of those infrastructure is there yet. The other opportunity that I see outside the oil is gas. Venezuela always was an oil country, but in 2000, they identified a lot of gas resources. Just offshore of Venezuela, probably there is over 30 TCF of gas. And onshore flaring is going on. And most of that gas opportunity is going to come towards LNG. I personally believe Venezuela, with the right investment and right direction, can become an LNG hub. And also they got an optionality to send that gas to Trinidad, which is there's 4 trains of Atlantic LNG, not sufficient gas to be filled. But they got that big opportunity in the gas as well. How that's going to play, I know that some of the company that they are involved in LNG in the U.S. are start talking about that. They're showing a high level of interest to get back in.
Maybe one more last question. It's a little bit off subject, but I think about, Venezuela was an original member of OPEC, right? The one member that was not an Arab nation. Venezuela is literally outside of the quota system at this point in time. If they start increasing production to 1.5 million and start thinking beyond that, how does OPEC, what happens? Does Venezuela say, we still want to be part of OPEC? Does OPEC now become more involved with this? How does that affect how American companies think about getting into Venezuela? I mean, all we've heard about is the American perspective. We haven't heard about the OPEC perspective. Maybe some thoughts from you on that.
Oh, my personal opinion is that's the concern. You got the volatility of the oil, you got the spare capacity, we still got the spare capacity, and you don't have robust demand. Just put these three together. Now, the last thing you want, additional barrels come into the system. Doesn't matter. Worse than Venezuela would be if the situation in Iran kind of turn around. Iran can ramp up the production much faster than Venezuela. They can do that one very quickly. For yes, they are concerned about it. They're going to do their utmost to keep Venezuela in the OPEC. They're going to do that no matter what, because the worst thing can happen. Venezuela said, I'm not part of the OPEC. Then I'm going to go ahead and stay on the other side. But the volatility of the oil, based on even we've seen the oil prices gone up in the last few days, is really a geopolitical factor because of the Iran and U.S. Tension in here. But fundamental hasn't changed. I keep looking at the fundamental. I said spare capacity, additional barrels, soft on the demand side. What would be the tendency of the oil price goes? And most likely on the downside and the upside. Right now, I personally believe even it's holding at WTI somewhere around $65 is just because of the geopolitical factor. It's not because of fundamentals.
The natural gas opportunity is interesting for sure. I think it was called Platforma Deltana, if my memory serves correctly, that they were going to open up when I think things changed there. So,
well, the gas they got probably somewhere around 15 to 17 TCF of gas sitting on the north side, and that's called the Marisco Sucre that can be connected very easily to Atlantic LNG. Then there is a Plataforma Deltana. One thing to keep in mind, Venezuela hasn't been explored for the last 25 years. They've been milking the cow. That's the reality. Exploration hasn't been there. The only gas exploration was done around the Plataforma Deltana via Chevron and Statoil. And I think Plataforma Deltana got a good strategic because it's right on the border with Trinidad. But the gas sector in Venezuela is going to be explored and it's going to be enhanced very quickly. If you look at on the western side, ENI and Repsol have a discovery and they are producing a field called La Perla, and that has close to 13 to 15 TCF of gas. And Venezuela never explored for gas. They thought that is a headache. And honestly, I was part of the system trying to bring the gas into the picture. If you recall it, in 2000, everybody running around building receiving terminal here in the US because we are running out of gas or receiving terminal. At that time, we focused ourselves in Venezuela gas. And I said, wow, this can be an LNG hub. And that's the reason discovered Platforma Deltana and so forth. Unfortunately, it turned around and now we are the largest LNG producer. I think Venezuela focus is going to be on development of gas. It's not going to be done by PDVSA or PDVSA gas. It's going to be done by entrepreneur and private company that you see building LNG plant here in the US. I think they're going to get that opportunity. They're going to think about that opportunity very quickly.
I mean, I really like the idea of these sort of private and different types of companies coming back in here. And I probably share your view that is likely to be the most, the most likely new participants into Venezuela. There is a reason, though, the bigger companies were there, not just the balance sheets and the significant capital that was required, but they were integrated operations. And so I think on the one hand, Venezuela got to over 3 million barrels a day of production, if memory serves, and a good portion of that was going to Gulf Coast refineries that presumably still have the capacity to process that, a bunch of the major players we all know. As a private company, how important is having some notion of downstream integration? I don't know that you need to be a, quote, integrated private company, but does it require some sort of agreement with the refineries, or is the presumption, hey, there's a lot of excess heavy coking capacity in the Gulf Coast and whatever we produce will make its way there? How important is that integrated aspect to a company like yourself?
It's a great question, and you got to go back into the history of when Faja opened up in 1990s, and at that time, to attract investors, they give a royalty of zero.
Yeah.
Well, they created integrated, but that integration was in the country. They built upgraders. The only one that integrated outside Venezuela was Exxon. Exxon upgraded the heavy oil to about 16 API gravity, then sent it to Chalmette refinery. The others, Total and Statoil, actually, I think Total and Statoil upgrade to about 30 plus degree API gravity. It's almost already integrated. If they would have gone one step, they could have created products. The Chevron was about between 22 and 27 API gravity. But all that integration was partially outside Venezuela. And that was by design, because they want to increase the value of the heavy crude to the light oil to sell it. It wasn't a matter of getting the margin out of the products. And Venezuela also looked at the Citgo as the outlet for their share. That's the reason they had Citgo and say, we don't need to have integration in the country, but as long as we increase the value of the heavy oil to the certain level, we got the outlet, which is Citgo, about 800,000 barrels a day. Other company, who were the players in the Faja area? Chevron, Conoco, Exxon, Total, Statoil, and PDVSA, and all of them had the outside to create that integration. But for Venezuela, was really important that they take the 8 to API gravity, that the value was X, to make it in the country to 25 API gravity, to make it to X plus Y, and send it out. That was his strategy.
Does your company need to be integrated, though, I guess is my question?
No. It's going to be basically utilizing production and just to add to my previous comment, and also these days you don't need to build those upgraders. Today you can do a blending. Therefore, if you look at that philosophy and knowing the value of the heavy oil is much better than 1990, which was about $8 per barrel, you really don't need to build those upgraders. Those are the old technology, old strategy. There are many ways to do it. We are looking at the integration, actually bring that crude to some of the nearby refinery. Remember, there is a bunch of refinery in the Caribbean that they are shut in, and those can play a role in here. But you got to utilize that one to create that integration, not necessarily building anything in Venezuela.
We're going to see the return of St. Croix. I love it. That's fantastic.
Yeah, somebody told me that there are a lot of them. There is Aruba, there is Curacao, there is many of them, and they can come in play. But at the moment is just get the production to the level and be able to market it.
Ali, you've been so generous with your time. There's a ton more things we want to ask you, but we got to be respectful here. Maybe I'll just do one last one.
Sure.
Which is, we are always thinking about the 10-year outlook for energy and all the things that entails: technology, policy, national security, environment, all of it. As you think out over the next decade and think about oil demand, where is your own, what are your thoughts about what the world looks like 10 years out for oil demand? And as part of that, where do you think, are we going to have trouble finding that supply? I'm leading the witness because that's a question that comes up around here. But how do you think about demand, and where do you think we're getting it?
That's a great question. I mean, that if you look at it, as I pointed out on LNG in 2000, we were panicking for gas. And look at the situation today. We were building receiving terminal and all that. And also in the same period, nobody looked at the Permian and saw as being where it is today, including the major oil company. All those was really initiated by mid-sized and smaller company. I think that we need to assure that we got an energy security, regardless of if we find the resource or not. Venezuela going to play a significant role to assure that we got an energy security. Now, the additional reserves coming in, I really believe that we're going to be dependent more on the foreign oil as we see United States production is start declining. My personal view has been we having a tendency in the US, because we are a free market, to always accelerate production. We don't look at the incremental. If you look at the Permian, we are still on the primary recovery. We're talking about how we get more oil out, but we are accelerating that. And that creates a little bit on the size of that. We always got to have a plan B for energy security for US, for our government. The resource, honestly, if you look at it, you got to rely on the energy success. I think we're going to be less successful in the future on the exploration. We are drilling in 10,000 plus feet water. Costs going to go up. I think is company going to go more and more international. Right now, very much focused domestic. But if you're asking me, is there any play type that may pop up? I hope so, but I'm not sure I'm going to bet on it or bet our energy security on that. The demand side of it, I really think the demand is going to continue to grow. I think the alternative energy is a good supplement, but I think overall the demand is going to continue. Maybe it's not going to be about 1 million barrels a year. You're going to look at something less than that, but the growth is going to be there. We're going to see more shift to the gas. I think if you look at all these data centers we are talking about where the energy is going to come in, relying on the gas is going to be more than before. We're going to just see the energy equation just shifting, but the results is going to be increasing the demand. I bet on that one.
Ali, we really appreciate your time. We're lucky to know you, and we were lucky to grab you for an hour of discussion. We really greatly appreciate it.
Hey guys, it has been my pleasure. It's always good to talk about the subject that is I'm passionate about it, and especially these days about Venezuela. Hopefully, everybody work and collaborate to make our policy in Venezuela be a success.
Well, things are changing so fast. We need to do this again in 6 months, but or sooner. Will you let us know?
Yeah, well, anytime. Be glad to talk to you guys about the subject, and just let me know. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ali. Thanks, everybody.